It was a dark and rainy evening. Hunger started to gnaw at me, and I decided to stop at a cozy restaurant along the road to take refuge and replenish my energy. While savoring one of the best dishes in the place, I noticed a man of ordinary appearance sitting at the table next to mine. He was dressed modestly and seemed engrossed in his phone, but every now and then, his eyes seemed to scrutinize my movements. After about 15 minutes of pretending not to notice, the man began to smile at me, and after a while, he started asking increasingly intimate questions about my life. He inquired about my job, my relationship status, and why I was dining alone. His persistence made me uncomfortable. After about 30 minutes, I left the restaurant trying to shake off that strange experience, but I felt like I was being watched. Turning around, I noticed that the man was following me. His figure, in a street illuminated only by the lights of signs, was truly unsettling. Fear took over, and I quickened my pace in an attempt to escape him. After a few minutes, I turned around, and fortunately, the man was no longer there. I didn't know what had happened to him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I thought I wouldn't see him again, but I was wrong. The following days were marked by chance encounters near my home. Every time I went out, there he was, in the vicinity. His presence began to affect my daily routine. I tried to avoid the restaurant and the nearby streets, but somehow, he always seemed to be around. I decided to confront the man. I asked him who he was and what he wanted from me. His response was a disturbing smile and an invitation to deepen our acquaintance. I firmly declined the invitation. The next day, as usual, I headed to my car to go to work. As I approached, I noticed something unusual on the windshield. It was a folded piece of paper. Curious and slightly worried, I grabbed the note and opened it. It was written in neat handwriting. The words were, "Curiosity is a virtue, but it can also prove dangerous." A shiver ran down my spine. I decided to share the incident with a childhood friend, James, hoping he could help me find a solution to the absurd situation I was experiencing. We met at a bar, and as we sipped our coffee, I began to tell him everything, from the evening at the restaurant to the note on my car windshield. James listened attentively, his expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief as I described the events. When I mentioned the words on the note, I saw his expression change. He was very concerned. "It's truly unsettling, my friend," he said. "We need to do something. You can't let this situation continue. Maybe we should involve the police or take other measures." His support reassured me, and together we started planning how to deal with the situation. We decided to track every encounter with the man, gather tangible evidence, and be vigilant about my safety. James also offered to accompany me and stay in my apartment for a few days, trying to discourage further approaches from the man. Fortunately, our precautions seemed to have an effect. With James by my side, the strange appearances of the man became less frequent. Initially, we noticed him observing from a distance, and then gradually, he disappeared altogether. Honestly, I don't know what he wanted, but I always believed he had ill intentions, and if it hadn't been for James, the situation would have escalated. I'm sure of it. As time passed, I tried to regain a sense of normalcy, but the worry remained, a sort of echo of what had happened. Every step, every furtive glance from a stranger put me on alert. That situation had left its mark. Life resumed, but the awareness of how everything could change in an instant remained alive. My name is Henry. I'm a young waiter, 29 years old, and I worked in a restaurant for about a year. It was a building from the 1900s with a rich history of mysterious events. After a few months of working there, I found myself involved in a strange situation. During a normal workday, I was in the kitchen when suddenly I started hearing strange noises from the lower floor, near the storage area, as if someone was moving among the shelves. Curious to understand what was happening, I decided to go downstairs and headed toward the storage. As soon as I opened the door, there was complete silence. No one was there. Then what were those noises? I wondered. I went back upstairs, caught up in the busy day, and didn't think about it anymore. But while setting up a table for an important dinner, I noticed a fleeting shadow heading towards the stairs leading to the lower floor. Determined to find out who it was, I ventured downstairs again. I remember my heart beating fast. I approached the storage area cautiously, scrutinizing the darkness carefully. Nothing seemed out of place. I checked among the shelves and corners, but there was no sign of anyone. That evening, as soon as I got home, I decided to do a little research on the history of the building. I discovered that in 1923, there was a fire in the storage area, causing the death of a chef. It was said that his spirit remained trapped in the building. It seemed the chef had spent much of his life in the restaurant, considering it not just a workplace, but a true home. His passion for cooking was so strong that his soul seemed still tied to that place. Over time, the mysterious story of the chef spread among the customers. They began reporting strange sensations during their stay at the restaurant. Some described a subtle breeze that seemed to brush their faces, while others claimed to feel a sense of warmth and well-being in the air. Others started to tell of whispered voices and muffled laughter heard in the air. Soon after, the restaurant began to experience a significant decline in customers. Despite efforts to mitigate the situation, such as changes in decor and special offers, the supernatural reputation proved to be an insurmountable obstacle. The regular clientele decreased significantly, and new customers were hesitant to approach the restaurant with its particular history. In the end, the owner, unable to sustain the expenses, was forced to make the difficult decision to close the restaurant's doors. The building turned into an abandoned place, and no business ever opened in that structure again. My name is Victoria, I'm 34 years old, and I've been working in a restaurant for the past 5 years. I enjoy my job, but unfortunately the pay is very low. What I'm about to tell you happened about 4 months ago. It was July, and at that time, I was going through a tough period. I was facing financial difficulties and was 3 months behind on rent. So I decided to look for a second job. Since I had been a waitress for several years, I decided to stick to that field, leveraging my experience. After about 10 days, I finally received a call from a restaurant offering me a week-long trial. When I arrived at the restaurant, I immediately sensed a strange atmosphere. It was a small, dimly lit place with an unpleasant smell. The cleanliness left much to be desired. Honestly, it wasn't the type of establishment I would choose, but economic necessity outweighed my preferences. The landlord kept calling me insistently, asking when I would pay the rent, so I accepted the job offer without hesitation, but with the awareness that it would be only a temporary job. It was almost closing time, around 11:30 p.m., and I was in the kitchen cleaning some glasses, waiting for the last customers to leave. The last table was occupied by 7 guys. They didn't look good and seemed to be in a state of drunkenness. After about an hour, they got up to leave. 2 of them approached the cash register to pay. One of them looked me in the eyes and smiled in a way that bothered me a lot. I pretended not to notice, thanked them, and wished them a good evening. As they headed towards the exit, I noticed that one of the guys seemed to have some difficulty standing up. It was clear that he was drunk, and his legs weren't responding as he wanted. His friends approached and helped him to his feet, supporting him and helping him walk towards the exit. After about 15 minutes, I finished my work, said goodbye to my colleagues, and left the premises. My home was about a 40-minute walk away. So I started walking, and after about 10 minutes, I heard the sound of a glass bottle, as if someone was kicking it. I turned around and saw the guy who had paid the bill at the restaurant a short while ago. Needless to say, I panicked. I began walking quickly, thinking the worst. I crossed the street, and he crossed too. Unfortunately, he was running faster than me and managed to catch up. He grabbed my arm and then the strap of my bag. His pupils were dilated, and he smelled of alcohol. I managed to free myself by taking off the shoulder strap of my bag and started running. In the distance, I saw a taxi. It was my only salvation. As soon as I reached the taxi, I opened the car door and shouted to the driver, "Hurry, please." Initially, he didn't understand, but then he saw the guy running towards the car. He started the engine and left immediately. At that moment, I had an emotional breakdown. I began to cry like I had never done in my life. The driver reassured me and kept telling me that I had been lucky. When I arrived home, I couldn't stop crying. After a while, I decided I needed to calm down and began to think that I had been lucky, and it could have been worse, much worse. I made some tea and took a hot bath to release all the accumulated tension. The next day I called the restaurant, explained what had happened, and said I wanted to resign. John, the owner, although I had known him for a short time, seemed like a very kind person. He said he liked the way I worked and would be sorry to see me go. So he offered to drive me home every night after work. I appreciated that gesture a lot, especially because I really needed that job at the time. Thinking about what happened still gives me chills, and even now, after about 4 months, I sometimes have nightmares at night. It was an experience that deeply affected me, but then, to myself, I think, the fact that I could tell the story, share it with someone, is not something to be taken for granted but a great fortune. It could have been worse.